Hey, welcome back to the BVB podcast. My name's Jacob, joined as always by Carver. And it's been a little bit. Obviously, things are moving and happening in preseason. So we thought we should probably bring on some guests for a special summer kind of season, or getting ready for the season, preseason update, if you will. A lot going on. So we're joined by our friends over from Dortmund Dispatch, starting with Eli, who's never been on the show. So Eli, man, how are you doing?
I'm very good. As we were doing like the little countdown, my dog burped very loudly, and so I went from being locked in to completely like off the rails at this point. So I'm sorry about that.
I mean, usually it's my dog making noises or me just forgetting how to intro a podcast. So we're usually off the rails right off the bat. So we're all used to that. And then we got Brian, probably has the award for the most guested appearances. I don't know how to say that. See, I'm off the rails already too. But Brian, good to have you back, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to hold the record. I'm glad to finally be on camera too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I'm getting used to it. But
we could see Brian for this is the first time we're actually seeing his face. He looks a little different than I thought, but it's
I've
good to
stopped
see
hiding. I've stopped hiding. It's good. It's good to see you guys too.
Carver, how are you doing, man?
Doing well. Next time we'll have all of our pets just right in front of the camera, and then it's just going to be 45 minutes of silence, some barking here and there, some sniffs. Just
Some
put
cats
that out as
meowing.
an episode.
I was talking to, this is very random, nothing to do with Dortmund, but just pets. I was talking to my wife. We're like, I think there's probably a market for that where you just like live stream your pet. Like, I'm sure you can make some money on Twitch doing that.
I mean, that's half a TikTok, but
Yeah. So that TikTok, that takes like editing and stuff that I don't want to do. Twitch, you just let it roll and just, here's Margot just chilling. Put some clothes on her, let her eat some treats. I don't know. I feel like there's a market for it.
It's a moneymaker.
listen, there's a will, there's a way.
All right, enough pets. Let's talk Dortmund. Carver and I did do kind of a summer update episode a couple weeks back. Talked about everything that went on because, which was a pretty big break from all the breaking news that happened. We were about to record an episode, and then they announced Nuri Sahin the day after Terzic, and we didn't record, and that was all worked out fine because we got caught up on everything, though. But I do want to get Eli and Brian, your guys' takes. Eli, start with you. Just kind of quick thoughts. You don't have to go super deep dive because you can plug your guys' podcast too, Dortmund Dispatch, where I'm sure you guys went a little deep on that. But your quick thoughts on the coaching transition and maybe some things you've been seeing in any of the trainings, if you watch those, or the first couple preseason matches from.
Yeah. So the underlying metrics really did not like Edin Terzic, and so watching last season outside of the Champions League, in the Champions League, it was a little hard to watch at times. Obviously, the Champions League, you're getting the results, so the enjoyment is definitely there, but you're not playing the most scintillating football, and so you can't really be too upset when he leaves. I was very shocked, but I was happy about it. With Shaheen, like that was the expected answer from the club, but it's just like, is he the most like qualified individual? No. Dortmund very clearly is not run in a meritocratic way, and sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. Is the most qualified person going to be one of 40 X players? Probably not. But could he be very good? Yes. He's very young. He's more experienced than a lot of people have talked about. Like, they're talking about, like, he's completely inexperienced. But if you look at Xabi Alonso, before he took over at Leverkusen, he never had a senior team position. Whereas Nuri Sahin was a bit of a player coach for a little bit at Dortmund and had managed like multiple professional seasons in a top 12 league in Europe. So he is more experienced than a lot of other people, I think, give him credit for. But there's good experience, there's bad experience, and I think we're going to find out this season pretty quickly if it's good or bad experience.
Brian, any initial thoughts on the transition?
Yeah, sorry, I was waiting for my turn. I mean, honestly, I feel it's obviously way too early to make any grandiose statements about what we can expect from Shaheen. Obviously, someone that's he's very much someone that, understands the club, who's obviously been around, is an ex-player, has an understanding of how the club is run, has some coaching experience. Obviously, maybe not exactly what you'd expect from a manager who's coming in to coach a club like Dortmund at that level. But once again, kind of like what Eli mentioned with Xabi Alonso, I mean, this is kind of becoming a trend. I mean, even with Bayern right now, with Vincent Company coming in and being a manager, granted he's not a former player there, but still kind of in the same vein of former players coming in and being expected to do well. In comparison to Terzic, I mean, I do like the change in philosophy. I think it's more Dortmund-esque, the focus on being more attack-minded, going through the middle and really trying to play more directly versus having this sort of, especially how he played in the Champions League. Granted, it was effective, but like it was very much, we're playing a bit more of a timid type of football, conservative type of football. As compared to what we're used to Dortmund playing. So that change is good. In terms of what we've seen from preseason, I mean, we've really haven't played any teams as of yet where we can be like, oh, this is like serious opposition. Granted, even, I mean, losing 4-0 the way we did to, I forget what the team was called, but it was a team from Thailand. I mean, that's...
BG Pathum United.
There you go. Thank you for that. I did not watch that one, but I was keeping tabs on the score and seeing that 4-0. I mean, that was disheartening. Granted, it is preseason. How much we can read into that, I don't know. But regardless, you shouldn't really be doing that. You shouldn't be losing. Even if you're going to lose, definitely not that badly. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. It's going to take time for his philosophy, I guess, to be adopted. He has been with the club for about 6 months now in the assistant role. So I mean, I guess they're kind of getting familiar with that. But I guess like they were kind of still torn between two. You had what Terzic wanted and what Şahin was kind of trying to do in the background. So yeah, I mean, time will tell. You got to give him some time to build something. I use Rose as an example for this very often, even with you guys when we've had these conversations. He's an example of a manager who is not given time to actually implement his philosophy, kind of dumped out too quickly. We did give Terzic 2 years to see if he could try and implement something. So at this point, we kind of do have to once again try and hope for the best and give this guy some stability to build something. But I will say it's nice to see Piszczek in the coaching staff. My favorite player, or I should say Dortmund player in particular, of over the course of the time that I followed the club. So to see him come back and play that role is really, really nice. So yeah, I mean that's exciting. And yeah, I mean we'll see what Şahin can do with this. He's gonna have to mold this team into what he wants it to look like, be it through his philosophy and obviously through incoming transfers and stuff like that. So I think we'll have a better idea of what we can expect, maybe like into like the first few games of the actual season.
Yeah, this is not new, but they only had one training session before the first preseason game. And anyone that hasn't seen it, the full session's on YouTube. It's a really interesting watch. I find those training sessions, no matter the club, very fascinating. And you saw that Şahin also talked about after the first preseason game, saying that we did want to play more centrally, talking about what you mentioned, Brian. And you saw also that Şahin and Piszczek was very involved as players in the training sessions too, which I think is a cool aspect to have. And with managers at that kind of level, it's not super uncommon, but it's also a little rare to have a manager of that style that can actually get on the field and play with those with the players. And we had a bunch of different players from the second team and also just like the academy too. So you got a good blend of experience and different play styles too, and you just get the chance to see everyone kind of mold together. But yeah, these first two preseason games, you only see a tiny taste of what Şahin's trying to implement. But again, playing more centrally and more direct is something to be excited about. And I saw a few clips from the game I didn't watch the other day in Thailand of Adeyemi missing a chance or two, and even just the game before that too. So that's a little concerning because I know he's always been a very sporadic finisher, and whether it's big moments or moments like these during the summer against a team of basically non-professionals at this point. So that's something that I'm imagining the club is going to be taking eye of. I've seen reports the past 2 weeks of maybe us looking elsewhere for teams like Juventus to pick up Adeyemi, who knows. But it's disappointing because I really wanted him to flourish here, but who knows where his future is going to lie, whether it's at Dortmund or not.
Well, I'm not going to write off Adeyemi on a preseason game, which I try not to take too much stock from anyways. I just try to see him a little more as like just running and getting the legs under you. And I think that the game in Thailand too I feel like there was not much time from when they landed to when they played that match. Might have been a lot of jet lag, and again, a lot of like younger players too. I think as we get a little further in preseason, that's when we'll really start telling a little more about what's going on. And I mean, if you want to factor in one indicator, is that the Mecha 2-minute brace in that one match. So according to that, he's going to be flying this year.
Yeah, I was not basing it on just
his level, games. Guys. He found his level because in that match, the passing was still terrible, but 2 goals, have to respect that. But against Engineers, very, very good. And then it was against the third tier side, the Professionals, and all of a sudden the struggle buses out again. He does not know where to be in build up. He's not getting on the ball enough. And like, he is very, very talented as a dribbler. I will never take that away from him. He has the combination of technique and physicality that you need in the midfield to carry the ball in tight spaces. If you're against the third division side, preseason or not, like that's when you need to like come alive and work on that. Like me when I'm playing pickup and I get matched up against a 40-year-old, like that's my level. I'm aware of that. Your level as a professional footballer making whatever $6.5 million we pay you, you go against the third tier side. If we're struggling in build up, like just take the ball on the half turn and beat some guys. And I would have liked to see a bit more there. Obviously did not happen, but I think that overall, he's the only player I'll criticize from this. But basically, I think like Karim Adeyemi over 2 seasons in Dortmund has matched his XG with his goal output pretty much. I think that's very overblown. I think the kid needs some support. And I think that players that can be the best attacking player in a Champions League final don't grow on trees. I know that's a very hot take, but I think that we should probably value that type of skill set, even if it's like not necessarily the most technically pleasing on the eye type of play style. Like, it's beyond just pace. Like, his movement is very, very good. And I think that like the biggest thing for me in preseason, you look at our midfielders, it's Eamon Azil, who's like fine from our second team. He's fine for the German third tier, but this is like a 23-year-old, like decently rated at one point, not recently. And then you're looking at like Tyler Miser getting a lot of minutes. Tyler Miser is a very, very highly rated 17-year-old center back, and he's playing in the midfield. He's done that at youth level, but it's like he's playing a considerably worse position for himself. And then for the first time in his life, he's having to do it against grown adults. So like that has to be a factor here. Kiel Watyin, like I love the promise. I believe in the promise. But like having any expectation of him beyond looking mediocre over 600 minutes is too high for someone of that age. Like I think he'll be good, but it's just like that's what we're working with in the midfield. Like even Sally Özcan, like he has his limitations, but he is a top 5 league midfielder, and like that can provide a lot more than like the minimum you will see from a lot of these other guys. Like maybe the top end performance isn't anywhere near what we've seen Watyin in like 180 minutes at senior level at this point, but like the floor is much higher than Watyin's floor for his like worst performances at this time. And like then we're talking about like after Mecha, it's literally just like some random guy to kind of play in the midfield. And it's very hard when you're trying to learn a new style of play and you don't have like even a highly rated like technical prospect where like Kiel Watyin at like still only a U19 player is basically your only first teamer who's capable of playing as a six, and it's not his like best position in the midfield. So you really just are judging a lot of like results on like I don't know. It's so hard for Shaheen to kind of like imprint his system when he doesn't even have like professional players in a lot of positions.
One thing I will say, though, just kind of going off that very briefly, is that I do like the fact that, I mean, like, we're saying that he doesn't have the players, but we're also kind of saying with this that he's using the youth team players and giving them the chance to actually play and show what they're capable of. We didn't see a lot of that under Terzic, and it almost seemed like we had kind of like deviated from that. So to see these players like Watson and everyone else kind of coming onto the pitch and getting those minutes, even if it's just preseason, we're seeing a lot more of that now than we saw it over the last 2 seasons. So it's good to see, and it's good to see that, you know, there's that focus kind of being brought back to that and knowing that they're going to actually play a role in this coming season. So that was important for me to see.
Yeah, and Brian is stealing from a statistic I kind of gave on our podcast. And in my writing, it was 12 U20 players in the first friendly this season compared to 4 U20 players from the first friendly of last season. And that is a very, very telling difference in the level of like second teamers last year who probably are a lot less likely to make the first team compared to now. It's a combination of like, is there a U19 player who's got the potential? And then if you don't have that in a position, you're going to the second team. So that way, your guys that have a better chance of being Borussia Dortmund first team quality are able to get in and around the first team rather than like the guy who might be marginally better now because he's like physically developed into an adult.
On the other side of the spectrum, I want to flip it real quick. We didn't mention last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess now, Jake and I, the signing of Girassi, an experienced Bundesliga player. I don't need to touch on too much, just the amount of goals that he scored last season, as well as now we're looking at, according to Sky information today, the transfer of Pascal Gross looks imminent. And that is very crucial, I think, to how this midfield is going to operate next year. How do you guys feel about the signature, or at least potential signature, of Gross and now confirmed with Girassi for the implementation of this team going forward this year?
I mean, with regards to Girassi, we talked a lot about him on our pod as well. I mean, striker wasn't necessarily, you know, the first position that I thought we needed to kind of look at. I think with Füllkrug and Moukoko in particular, because I think a lot of people just off the bat thought that, you know, we'd be looking to move Haller on in the first place. But just with those two, I felt that we had a solid base for striker. You know, moving on to the next season, there's obviously other positions like we've been talking about. I mean, midfield, particularly in the sixth position, signings should have kind of been prioritized. And I guess we're kind of getting that with Gross in terms of him being kind of like that Swiss Army knife type player where he can play it right back at 6, 8, 10, even if you need him to. So, I mean, in that sense, that signing's good. But I mean, just sticking to Girassi first, I mean, once again, not exactly what I expected the focus to be, but considering the numbers and the hope that he will produce what he produced at Stuttgart again, the hope that is that he will be a good signing. We did also talk a lot about the fact that we are getting a player that, you know, is coming off this injury, and there is that risk to that as well. You know, and getting a player of that age and with that sort of injury coming in, that's always a risk. And then moving on to Gross, I guess, just to bundle it all together. I mean, I've always, from the moment that he was linked, I thought that was a good deal. I understand that, you know, online there's differing opinions on it. Some people will say, oh, he's not the typical profile, he's super old, whatever. But you kind of do need that veteran player in your squad anyway, especially Dortmund, I think, in midfield needs that sort of veteran player to come in and also be of assistance and kind of help bring some calm to the midfield. And like I said, he's kind of a bit of a Swiss Army knife. He can play in a bunch of different positions, so he'll be useful for depth. Obviously, it'll also depend on the financials with regards to Gross. I mean, it would be great if, you know, the club could get him for lower than what we're looking at with like the 10 million euros that everyone keeps talking about, because that is, substantial, I think. It's like a substantial chunk of the budget for a player of that age. But if he performs the way he did for Brighton this season, I don't think you can go wrong. So, and we do need competition in midfield. So overall, I think that will be a good signing, and I'm hopeful that Girassi will be a good signing. Again, the numbers point to him being a very good signing at striker. We don't know how he'll perform in Shaheen's system, but once again, just kind of like with everything else going on under Shaheen right now, we just kind of have to wait and see.
Yeah, with Girassi, we didn't have the update on the extent of the injury last time we recorded, but it has now been reported. Obviously, the deal has gone through. Dortmund still thinks that this injury is not going to be too serious. It will not require surgery. We're looking at about time frame of like 4-ish weeks. So it is going to be a massive, massive chunk, if not almost all of preseason that Girassi will miss, which is kind of shitty. But still, I mean, he's someone that is obviously capable of just kind of coming right in whenever he is fit and producing the numbers. At least that's what I believe. And then in terms of gross, yeah, hopefully if we can get a little lower figure than that you were mentioning, I think that'd be a good bargain. He is 33 years old, but man, and I don't watch too much Premier League, but I do watch a good amount of Brighton whenever I am watching the Premier League, and he makes that team click, even at just the age that he is. And for someone that is able to control a midfield like that at that kind of level, and arguably the most talented competition there is, or at least league there is in world football, that's something that I would really like on my team, especially for a team that is really struggling to progress the ball, whether it's centrally, out wide, just in any way advancing the ball through the midfield. I think he's going to be a big help. Eli?
Yeah, so Gross is fine. 1-for-1 with Ozchan, like that's a pretty big upgrade. You can't ask for much more. Yeah, the age profile is not necessarily what you would want it to be alongside a nearly 30-year-old Sabitzer and a 30-year-old Shan, but 1-for-1, fine. I don't need to talk about it much more. Like, people know who he is. Like, he's a good player. There's not too much more to say about that. Maybe like a 30 million pound Fafana, a 25 million pound Taram would be better long-term business than signing Girassi when you have Nicholas Fulkrug, but we'll see what happens with the outgoings at striker. My issue with Girassi, and I've said this a lot on my own podcast, is basically for the first time in his career, he reached 2,000 league minutes. And then all of a sudden, 1/3 of the calendar year, he's been injured. He's expected to miss 3 league games, so that's the first 4 competitive fixtures. And if you're looking at this injury, if it had occurred in like the middle of the season, you're going to be talking about missing like 20 games. And that is quite frankly not worth the 70 million pound package you're spending on the guy, when like last summer it was Victor Boniface who moved for around a 30 million package.
Yeah.
And that was on a 5-year contract for the entirety of his prime years. So it does not necessarily meet the market value for that type of player. But at the end of the day, like when he is on the pitch, he is producing decent numbers. Like I say decent because when you're not able to eclipse 2,000 minutes regularly, no matter how good your numbers are when you're playing for top 6 sides, like in Lille, like in Rennes, or not Rennes, excuse me, but he's played like with Lille especially, or Rennes. I don't know my French teams. I might be getting them confused at this point. But basically, he's played for like top half sides. He's not gotten a ton of minutes, and he's had very good underlying numbers, which you'd rather have very good underlying numbers. But when you're not accumulating the level of minutes, like 2,000 minutes is not an incredible amount. I think Fulkrug had way too many this past season because he didn't get rotated, but he was a lot closer to like 3,000 league minutes almost. Basically, what you're looking at is a guy whose body broke down in his first season with over 2,000 minutes. Whenever he's on the pitch, his numbers have been good, but for most of his career, that's been a bit more as a rotation option or like a super sub. And when you're coming on against tired legs, that's going to make your numbers look a lot better. He definitely passes the eye test, but the biggest worry for me is just, can he stay on the field? Because you literally look at a 10-year senior career from the time he was 18 to the time he was now 28. And as soon as he hits that 2,000 minute mark, which is like the mark of a starter, his body has quite literally broken down. And to miss a third of the year with what we're paying him is just kind of like not good, bit would be, make it bad business essentially, when you know like the risks were there. He missed an entire year earlier in his career with recurring knee issues. And once you're injured, it makes like the next injury more likely, and he hasn't had the minutes to kind of test that until this season, and instantly there it is, a third of the year injured.
Yeah, what makes me a bit skeptical too is just the future of the likes of Fulkrug. We're seeing that he may be potentially out the door to Milan or wherever he might potentially land up. And then, of course, Mukoko has been up in the air for what? It's longer than this podcast at this point, right, Jake? I mean, we've had so long now where we're like, are we going to get an extension? And then we did. And it wasn't that long of an extension. And then even right after the fact, he was still thinking about maybe leaving. I mean, that's all just still reports from now almost a year ago. So who knows where his head is at this point. But yeah, we could go from 4 strikers to literally like maybe 2, 1 that's healthy within a matter of weeks here. So we really got to make sure we're playing our cards right here. Jake, sorry, I'll have you hop back in.
Yeah, I mean, my worry is Fulkrug going, and then what if Girassi does end up getting injured? Like, what is that next option? Obviously, it's Mukoko. I think Carver, we talked last time too about, we've been talking about Mukoko for so long. This has to be the year where he kind of steps up and makes his impact, like a season-long impact, especially if Fulkrug's out the door. Because if he's out the door, like, I just don't know how, like, what the plan is. I think Adeyemi is an option, but that also kind of, as of right now, leaves us a little low on the wings too. Like, he has played that striker. Adeyemi has played that striker position before. Mullen is obviously questionable if he's going to be sticking around too. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess Brian, I'm going to throw it back to you, but in the case of Fulkrug out the door, that one seems more likely, I think, than Adeyemi, maybe Mullen right now. Maybe you can speak differently, but what does that front 3 look like? Like, if Girasi's out, if we need to rotate, like, how do you see that scenario possibly playing out?
I mean, it's really also going to depend on what happens with Haller, right? I mean, it seems like the club, like I had mentioned, and this is something we've talked about previously, it looks like they're trying to move him on. So, I mean, if he goes, then and Fulkrug goes as well, then we are left with Girassi and Mukoko up top. And then at the end of the day, if Adeyemi's still there, I assume that under Şahin he'll be starting, and then we'll have Mullen as well, or Gene bynoe-gittens on the other wing. He may try and play Mullen through the middle. I don't know. Maybe if that's an option, if they need additional depth. I mean, it's something that Mullen himself has said previously that he prefers to play more through the middle, and that's something that he would want to do. So maybe that's something that they try. I mean, I don't know where else you get that depth from if both Haller and Fulkrug both end up leaving. But it's a double-edged sword, because then even if Fulkrug does stay and now you have Girassi, that's 3 strikers with Girassi, Fulkrug, and Mukoko. Does Mukoko's situation change? Does something like this need to happen to force kind of Şahin's hand or the club's hand to play Mukoko more so that he gets those minutes? Because otherwise, I don't see him breaking in as much, especially if he has Fulkrug and Girassi up in front of him. So it really depends. Either kind of we got to shoot our shot and really back this kid to be able to play a more important and bigger role, or we do our best to keep Fulkrug to kind of maintain that stability and make sure that we have a player that the club trusts to come in if something happens to Girassi. I know we're saying that, or not we're saying, but Şahin is saying, I don't see any sort of problem there with having both a very ambitious Germany international Fulkrug and Girassi coming in on a big contract. I don't see it being really a competition. But at the end of the day, that's exactly what it's going to be. I don't see how he puts both of them in on the pitch at the same time. Maybe he works wonders, and he does. I mean, I do believe that Girassi did play in a front 2 with Undav at times at Stuttgart as well. So I guess it is a possibility. But yeah, I guess it really depends on how we're going to play and how he decides to set this team up. But once again, you kind of got to pick your priority. Is it making sure Mukoko gets those minutes and is actually able to play a bigger role? Or do you go with the safe bet and make sure that these two top strikers do end up competing with each other for that starting spot?
So for me, I think that you kind of got really unlucky with the Guirassy injury, taking him out for those first 3 games, because then you're going to see the club a little tempted to kind of hold on to Fulkrug or Haller until after some of those games. Because if you look at the 2 strikers Shaheen played with when he was in Turkey, it's Haji Wright, 6'3", and Adam Buxa, who is 6'4", kind of built like Carver, very tall, a little thin. But regardless,
you're like he's a little weird looking, you know.
I didn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth.
Buxa isn't weird looking, man. He's a good striker. He's a good guy. Carver doesn't look weird either.
Brian thinks he looks very good because he's Polish. But basically, you're looking at like playing Guirassy and Fulkrug in a front two. Like, I don't necessarily think that would work, because when Undav is next to Guirassy, he's pretty quick. Fulkrug is not mobile. Guirassy is not slow, but he's not necessarily quick. I think Mukoko would be a better complement. I don't necessarily know if that's what Shaheen's thinking. Whenever Mukoko has played, he has scored. You look at the lowest goals per 90, it was obviously that season when he was forced to start, or when Terzic was forced to start him, I should say. And that's to be expected. He's 2 years older now. I think he should be a little bit more capable of starting. And just watching him play, he has the poacher's instinct. There was the brace he scored late last season. The ball just finds him in the box in good places, and that's very, very valuable. So personally, I'm comfortable with selling both Fulkrug and Aller. I'm not comfortable paying a guy $6 million or $10 million a year to sit in the bench. I'm very happy for the players to earn the money. I'm not necessarily excited about Dortmund not being able to spend that money on new players who are a part of the future, and kind of like shelling it out for guys who aren't really going to have a future with the team once Guirassy is fit, and assuming he stays fit. So like that would be my worry. But I think the biggest thing is, like, you guys kind of talked about Dortmund not necessarily having the attacking depth. I think there's a lot of different ways you can figure it out, because if Mullen goes up top, you're looking at Jamie bynoe-gittens, who's kind of been slowly bedded in, doubling his minutes year on year. He's now going to be playing at a full starter's minutes this year, or should be expected to. Adeyemi had some muscle injuries, missing out on the preseason, getting injured on like the terrible American fields that cost a lot of players the start of the season last year. And basically, I think that hopefully he gets managed a little bit better and doesn't go from not starting a game for like a month and a half to starting 3 games in a week and then immediately getting a muscle injury. That's kind of more on your manager, Terzic. I'm not saying any names, but basically, I think if he's responsibly managed, like maybe he has still a couple muscle injuries because he's so fast, but that's a little bit better of a situation. Daniel Mullen has, for the most part, had a pretty good injury record. And then all of a sudden, like, if you have to play one of them to rotate with Mukoko up top, I think you do actually have a lot of wing options if you're allowed to play Jamie bynoe-gittens an extra, like, 800 minutes this year, because then all of a sudden you have Cole Campbell, who is supposed to train with the first team but has an injury. That can be like 300 to 500 minutes this season, because he's kind of ready for he's probably ready for senior football. Not necessarily a big role, but just getting those like 30-minute substitutions in. Paris Brunner definitely ready for senior football. Having watched him in the preseason, looks very, very bright every time he gets on the ball, and has been wanting to play senior football. So I think he's definitely like a guy that could play like 500 to 600 minutes. This isn't a guy who's like 18. Like, he's 18 now. He's not like one of these guys like Jamie bynoe-gittens who is coming out at 17, like Jadon Sancho at 16, 17. Like, this guy's a little bit older. Like, it's okay to say, go get 500 minutes for me. Julian Duranville, like, if he's fit, that's another couple hundred minutes. And all of a sudden, you're like filling a decent amount of time until you get like your striker back, and you're still gonna have like Jamie bynoe-gittens, who's a starter. His only severe like injury, I believe, has been like a broken arm. So he doesn't have really an injury history yet. You have Kareem Adeyemi, who should be getting like a minimum like 1,500 to 2,000 minutes in the league, and Danielle Mullen, pretty consistent around that 2,000 minute mark. I think a bit less last season, and because he kind of got ousted by Jadon Sancho. But like across those players, you're getting like three guys with starter minutes, and then you have a lot of guys that could kind of pick up a role behind them. So I think you don't necessarily have one good option, but you have a lot of guys who like you want one of them to work out, and all of a sudden they have 800 minutes, and you're fine.
Yeah, I had it listed down to just ask, like, as far as all these young kids, like, who you guys expect to come in and get some minutes. I had Paris Brunner in there. I obviously think JBG is going to make that step. He played so many beneficial minutes for us last year. He stepped up when we really needed him. I fully expect him to be in that kind of rotation, fighting for a spot with Adeyemi and Mullen. I am still a little worried though, like say, and also I apologize to Haller. I didn't even mention him earlier because I kind of already see him out the door. So if he sticks around, then cool. But I kind of see him not as an option going into this next year, which is why I skipped him. But the worry for me, like I am excited for these young kids, and I like that aspect. Like that's an aspect of Dortmund that I've always loved, is like getting these young kids minutes, getting them developed, and letting them play real football. I'm not quite sure if I haven't seen enough from Paris Brunner yet. And Duranville's been so injured ever since he's came in. I'm just so like, if he is healthy for a full season, I cannot wait to see him run out on the pitch. But right now, like, I know it seems like Adeyemi, Mullen, to me, my perspective, Adeyemi, Mullen, JBG, I think you still want an actual like starter just to push each other even more, especially if a striker goes down injured and you have Mullen or Adeyemi playing up top. Like for me personally, I just want someone a little more senior or a little more experienced to be pushing, because I don't know. I think this has kind of been an issue the last couple of years, especially where we just go down and we don't have the depth. But then also, like, if we want to compete in the Bundesliga, in the Champions League, in the Pokal, if we want to be competing on all fronts, we need a squad that is competing for those spots, and we haven't always had that. If anyone has anything else, you can jump on that. Or I was also going to use this to transition to the back line a little bit, where we're definitely a little weak.
gonna take your segue actually. So we're talking about young players, and I think it's very hard to not talk about Tom Rotha. I am Tom Rotha's biggest fan. If you've watched the last two preseason games, first of all, my condolences that you had to sit through that. The only Dortmund player aside from like Julian Brandt that you could say played very, very well and very consistently would be Tom Rotha. I talked earlier about how like the midfield, we didn't really have the starting personnel. We couldn't really progress the ball through there. Tom Rotha could. He did a very, very good job playing that ball up to the winger. Like every time Tom Rotha's on the pitch, whichever half he's playing, it's the winger ahead of him that looks good. And there's a significant correlation to that. Like in the first game, it's Jamie bynoe-gittens playing ahead of him. And all of a sudden, he's getting the ball time and time again in good positions. It's because of Tom Rotha. It's also because Jamie bynoe-gittens is talented. I'm not trying to take away from him. But Tom Rotha's feeding him. He's opening up the space. And then if you look against BG something Pantham United, Tom Rotha again in this match was honestly the best he's looked in preseason. This is a guy that kind of tore up the second tier, like arguably a top three player in the second tier last year. In terms of importance to his squad, he was the most important player on a team that got promoted automatically. So that's like genuinely like very rare to see of a U23 player. let alone a teenager. This guy is 6'4". He can be a threat off set pieces. He can be a threat crashing the box. And it turns out like his progressive passing, like it was very obvious to see the technique last year, but early in the preseason, you're seeing the vision. This is a guy who's played a full senior season now. So you're looking at a guy who could very comfortably start, whether you want to play a traditional flying wingback or like the inverted defensive midfielder. Like he can kind of play that as well. He could play on the left side as a back three. Like maybe not the best in his 1v1 duels on the ground because he is so tall and so young. He just needs a bit of physical maturing to get used to that size in duels. But like otherwise, I think he could kind of like play a number of roles that tactical versatility will help him. His competition, Spencer Baini, who at his very best is an above average Bundesliga player. Tom Roth at his best could be like genuinely world class. That's the type of potential he has. But obviously he has some ways to go to achieve that. But that's my young player, and that's your perfect segue into the back line.
Confidence in the man. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, before we segue, I just kind of wanted to talk about the depth thing that you mentioned there, Jake, in your last thing, because I think that's kind of the logic behind why a player like Ryan Cherokee is being targeted. Because that sort of player is the type of player that, I mean, he's been compared a little bit to Jadon Sancho. Not exactly the same type of player, but he can play out wide. He can play through the center. And I do think he'd be a great addition in terms of depth for the squad, especially considering how many games we're going to be having this season. We have, obviously, the Champions League new format, which is an additional couple games. You have the DFB Pokal, the Bundesliga, and then you also have the Club World Cup coming up. So you're going to need that depth. So I 100% agree with you on that. Another player, though, which I've very much been a very big fan of, and I think Dortmund were linked to earlier in the transfer window, if I'm not mistaken, is Brian Gruda. I think that would be a fantastic option as well. Will that happen? I don't know. Considering we're already linked with Cherokee, I think they're going to end up going with that. But also a good option in case something were to fall through there. So,
all right, real quick, before we actually transition to the defense again, and we don't need to go off on it. Carver and I talked a lot about him last week, but I just want yes or no answer, because I think this is a player who, if given the opportunity, if takes the opportunity, he could be an answer in multiple positions, whether it's out on a wing or in the midfield. Gio Reyna, is he sticking around at Dortmund? Yes or no, Brian?
No.
Eli?
I just want to see the guy get minutes. I'm not going to give you your yes or no. Gio Reyna under 1,000 minutes, I would bet money on it, and that's kind of unfortunate for the player. I think that his dad has kind of like become his agent or something now, and I think his dad's career at club level in management in the front office was not necessarily great, and I just don't know if he necessarily had the right ideas for what Gio Reyna should have kind of done. I don't know. Just a bad situation. Like he needs to get some people around him with smaller egos, but like enough confidence to kind of tell him like what it is. Like just he should have gone to Ajax and like dominated last year if that was like an option.
Yeah, mixing family with business is always a great idea. Am I right, guys? I say, well, I want to say no, but I guess it depends who's interested in him. I have not personally seen a single report of anyone having any remote interest in Gio Reyna, probably for a number of reasons that we could probably already guess. But if a suitable offer comes in, I can absolutely imagine Dortmund cashing in on him and hopefully using that cash to reinvest into the back line, transitioning again.
All right.
That's a real transition.
So, I mean, quickly on the back line, Eli, just jumping on the Tom Rota thing. I was all of last year, like before Motson came in, I was just like, just bring Tom Rota back. When they sent him on loan, I was so mixed. It was like, I know a loan will be good for him, but I think we just need him. We need another body, and I think he's good, and he would have gotten some time if he stuck around. Obviously, hindsight, like that loan was perfect for him, and he killed it. So now he has a chance to come back and I think take a starting spot from Benza Baini. And I would be very happy to see that too. I still think I just have no faith in Benza Baini at this point anymore. So it's like I still think we need someone else there. But we did Carver and I talked about it last episode. I'm sure you guys talked about it too. The quick shout for Valdemir Anton, our new center back, also from Stuttgart. We see him come in. We see Mats Hummels leave. So we're basically 1-for-1, and we're still a little short on the back line. Yeah, who wants to start with the back line? What else do we need? Center backs, left
I
backs,
got
right
a
backs.
quick hit on Benzabaini. I think that like kind of the like 6-game win streak coming out of the break last year really made him look bad. He had some very, very dumb moments in Bundesliga games, as did Mats Hummels last year. In the Bundesliga, his level was much lower. In the Champions League, I thought he was very, very good. I don't think he really put a foot wrong in the Champions League. I think he gets very hard done by because like that rhetoric shifted, and Matson got a ton of credit for that. And I think there were a lot of other guys that were kind of involved. So I think Benzabaini's like been judged unfairly, and he's one of those guys that kind of has that like narrative built up around him because he did a couple very dumb things. Whereas like Matson also did a couple very dumb things and is just not talked about in the same light. Um, Granted, there's a bit of a difference there. Like, is Matson better? Yes. But I think the difference is a lot smaller than people kind of like act like it is.
Yeah, for me, Benzemaini's just been pretty underwhelming when it comes to the attack. And I obviously know the man's a defender. He puts up a lot of really good defensive stats, and he's proven to be pretty stable. But just, I guess, just seeing his numbers at Gladbach and seeing him play a few times for Gladbach and even scoring against us when he played at Gladbach, I expected him to be a bit more of an aerial threat, really on both sides of the ball. I haven't seen that too much. I still think he can absolutely be a reliable player for this upcoming season. I mean, God knows we're going to need it in that back line, but I'm just not sure if he's going to be the player that we need to be at that next level in all these competitions that we've already mentioned, right? I mean, we are in so many comps this year, and there's going to be so many minutes to be shared around. I'm just hoping Benzabaini can stay healthy and build some form, because yeah, that back line is going to need so much support these next 12 months, really.
Yeah, I think right now I definitely feel a lot better having Ben Sabaini there and kind of the setup we have at fullback in particular than I did prior to finding out whether or not Matson was going to stay or not, because obviously I was a very big proponent of him staying.
Yeah.
But considering now that he's not staying, the fact that we're bringing Rota back in and building him up, that is a good thing. Having Ben Sabaini behind him is going to be okay, but particularly because, and hopefully this is what does occur, we are linked with Jan Kuto now, and if we bring him in, that makes that frees up a lot more of Rierson's minutes. So hypothetically speaking, let's say Rota's struggling or something, right? And Ben Sabaini isn't cutting it. We can theoretically have Rierson out on the left as well to kind of help cover and make sure that Rota, for example, isn't being put under massive pressure because his backup can't take any of the minutes or anything like that. And then you have Rierson and Kuto, which could be a bit more of an attacking fullback combination. I know Rierson is mainly more defensive, but we have seen, especially over the last season, that he can move forward and he can score goals. And I think that's something that kind of came out more this season in particular for him. But if we do sign a player like Kuto who comes back into that back line, there's a lot more tactical flexibility, which I think makes the situation we're in a lot more palatable. It makes me feel more better about Rota's prospects of developing and making sure he's not put under that massive amount of pressure, because we do have more flexibility to put players in the event that something happens. I do think that he will do well. I don't think it's going to come to that. But it's good to have that additional kind of backup. Just be like, okay, like we're safe in that position, because we do need the depth regardless.
Thank you for saying all of that, Brian. I second all of that. And reports from today from Sky Information saying that Jan Kuto is a priority for Dortmund. Looks like we're kind of in a very, very similar position that we've seen for a number of players this summer so far, of just us trying to take down the price tag. The opposition obviously not wanting to do that, but we're looking at a figure of around 20 million right now. That looks somewhat feasible for Dortmund for what little of the budget that we have left. I'm hoping that that can be enough to convince Man City, because I'm desperate for some investment in this back line, and I've been saying that for way too damn long now in this show, and definitely in that fullback department. That is way too much pressure for Rota, as you mentioned, way too much pressure for Rierson too. For 4 competitions for 1 right back is absurd, and that it's simply not sustainable in the slightest. So any sort of investment that can be reliable, fit, healthy, I'm just, that's all I'm waiting for every day now. I'm very excited.
And the cool thing about Kuto as well, I'm sorry to cut you off, Jake,
You're good.
is he can also play out on the wing too. So just putting that out there as well. So we do add some additional wing depth too. So obviously we'll see what happens with Cherokee down the line as well. But even if we don't end up signing him, we do have a player that can play that more attacking role as well if need be. So there's that too.
Yeah, his defensive numbers look pretty underwhelming, at least when it comes to versus other fullbacks. But if we are in a position, which happens plenty of times before, where we're not getting too much going forward, especially out wide, that'd be definitely a great position to bring on later in a game. Sorry, Jake.
The only thing, I've said it so many times, but since you mentioned Rierson right back in 4 competitions, I love to add in that not only was he right back, but also left back for a lot of that time too. And we would put Wolf in. So he was 2 positions in 4 competitions, but the dude's a machine. And luckily he survived this season. Shifting it slightly to the middle in the center back conversation, I mentioned Anton, but I do have to shout out Nicolas Sula. Like the work he put in the offseason, which is just obviously so clear if you've seen the photos of him, like that almost feels like a new signing, in the sense that if you already worked that hard, like can you imagine like the work he's now doing back with the team and the effort he's going to be putting in this season to really fight for one of those starting spots, and which is only going to help. And as far as, I don't know if there's been links to any other center backs, or if we're trying to bring another center back in. I think maybe the option is like the young guys. We've been talking about it all episode, but is there an option for young guys to come in if we need it? And I mean, I've been hot on the Koulibaly train for a while, and I don't know if this is the time for him to get a few more minutes, if they'll send him out on loan again, but that's my option if we're not signing anyone else.
I think he's heading out, honestly.
Yeah, he seems to be out the door to Betis, and then you're kind of like left in a bit of a weird situation, where right now it appears that Lours, who's a German U20 center back, not a German U20 starter, to be clear, who will mostly be with the second team, is kind of going to be your 4th center back to start this season. It's been rumored to be Filippo Mane for about 3 years. Like at this point, we were supposed to be seeing him. Unfortunately, he's had a couple too many injuries, and we've signed a lot of like young center backs, but they're all like years away at this point. Like I think it's like Luca Reggiani, we just signed from Sassuolo, Italy, like U16 captain. He was a bit too young for the U17 side that just won the Euros for Italy, but he is a very strong prospect. He's just too far away. You have Elias Benkara, who's been with the team in the first team in the preseason, just too far away. So it's really Mane, who to me, like the no young player really exists before they've made any time with the senior team. And this guy in particular is kind of like that. Like, please do not have any expectations of him because he's been injured so long. He's very, very highly thought of Italian like youth center back that we've signed. But it's just like so many injuries, and it's so unlucky because he is supposed to have had such tremendous potential. But he really hasn't even played at the U19 level regularly for about 2 years now. So the 4th center back is kind of like hope that no one gets injured. We have 2 guys. This is your positive here. So Anton has previously played like every minute in a Bundesliga campaign. He has a very, very good injury history. For what it is, Nico Schlotterbeck was kind of an Iron Man last year. Played in I think 33 of 34 Bundesliga games, while playing in just about every Champions League match as well, on a run to the final. The performances like rarely dipped for fitness related reasons. He had the one bad game, Bayern, if you really want to like call him out for anything. But at that point, you're being very picky because kind of everyone was terrible that day. So yeah, you're basically relying on 3 guys to not get injured who historically have not gotten injured. The one thing I would say about that from a sports science perspective, you can talk about Sula when he was a little bit overweight. He wasn't playing. He was not necessarily playing poorly. He just wasn't on the field. When you lose, it's been rumored 7 to 10 kilograms, which kind of lets you know that those leaks are kind of not entirely realistic because it's a different number every time. I feel like when it first came out, it was 7 kilograms. I saw it later in the day, it was 9 or 8. And then, like, a couple days later, it was at 10. So all of a sudden, he's gone from being down about 15 pounds to being down about like 25 almost, or 22 and a half, whatever it is. That's going to make you a bit more likely to be injured, to lose that much weight. That's like 10 pounds a month. That's the absolute like maximum you can lose, and that's going to make you a little bit more injury prone. So that's something to keep an eye on, but I think that he'll probably be fine. This is a guy who's been playing professional football for nearly a decade.
Just really disappointing that we're now 2 years running now straight. Jake and I both saying that we have basically three first team center backs in this team, and you know, one injury away, and now you're looking at the bench going like, we don't have anyone else that is regularly playing senior football. I don't want to keep you guys too long. I do want to just touch on one more subject, unless you guys had anything else. Jake, do you have anything for that?
Yeah, this is why I should check Twitter before I get on the podcast and try to spit facts. But it's off season, so I'm in chill mode. So
yeah. Do you guys have any overall predictions for us where we might end up in the table this year, or any general thoughts about our play style, of what you're expecting to see, or any just individual shout outs of who you're excited for?
I think predictions in terms of where we're going to end up will be a lot more accurate once our transfer business is done. If we're just kind of saying like right now, like where we're at with the 2 signings that we've made, and like that's it, that's all we do, it's a very perilous situation. Kind of like what you said, not enough cover in defense, too much cover in attack, and it's just I don't know. I definitely wouldn't want to go into the season with the way the team is right now.
Right.
But if we sign Cherokee, if we sign Kuto, and Gross comes in, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we get a proper 6 in, I think we can definitely get back up to second at least. If Girassi is putting up the numbers that he was last season, I'm not going to say that we're going to shoot for maybe the Bundesliga, but a DFB Pokal is 100%, within reach this year. I mean, you see what's happening right now with Leverkusen with their signings. I mean, Martin Terrier for them is a fantastic signing. They're doing really, really good business right now. So they're really looking to, try and make sure they can pull off a double with that and try and win it a second time in a row. So that's going to be a tough team to get past again, I think. And then obviously Bayern is trying to, get like a lot stronger now too. I mean, they've signed Paulinha. They're in for Xavi Simons, Desiree Doué. They're really like adding quality into, so it's not going to be an easy task. I'm assuming Stuttgart will also try and add some players in, but I don't think that they're going to be at the same level again this year, especially considering we're doing our damnedest to tear them apart, for better or for worse. So I think second, maybe third is definitely like reachable. But I think I'll definitely feel a lot better about our prospects after I've seen who we've signed, and hopefully the signings that we're linked with do end up going through, because then I think our prospects, and especially for silverware, end up being a lot better.
Well, we obviously did a how to fix, and Dortmund did not pay attention. They allowed Sergi Cardona to go to Villarreal on a free transfer. I know they can't compete with our wages. That guy is very, very talented. Mats Wiefer going for...
It pains me.
A transfer equal to Seru Girassi. It turns out that that hasn't necessarily... Like, they should have listened. I think we would have every Dortmund fan in a much more positive spirit. Just a lot less risk, a lot lower wages coming in. that said, Borussia Dortmund, we're going to be finishing third. It's okay, rebuilding year. Nuri Sahin making us play a little bit more interesting football. The games will be a lot more watchable. We'll give a decent account of ourselves in the Champions League. Cup is difficult to say, and then I'll give you top scorer. This is the hardest prediction to make. I think it will be Seru Guirassy. I think he won't necessarily have the minutes. I don't think he's hitting well over 2,000 minutes. I think he might be right around that 2,000 mark in a best case scenario. But even if once he hits like 1,600, I think he's pretty much good enough to be our top scorer. Our top assister, it's very obvious. It'll be Julian Brandt. If he really goes off, he could end up as the top scorer. He's had a lot of seasons around 10 goals.
Yeah.
He gets a couple free kicks, and he has the technique from distance. Maybe he just goes on a hot streak, and all of a sudden you're looking at a guy who's scoring like 15, 20 goals. So that is possible, especially under a more attacking coach. Like, this guy almost had a 10-goal, 10-assist campaign under Terzic last season. Do you know how hard that is? Like, did you watch us last year? We were terrible. We didn't touch the ball in the final third. This guy's got 10 goals, 10 assists, playing the second half of the year as a number 8. Like,
Right.
Genuinely, what a player. So then my breakout player, I can't say Jamie bynoe-gittens because I feel like he had about 1,500 senior minutes last year. So I got to go Tom Rotha. He had more senior minutes, but like second division, like he's got to be my breakout player. And then what's another good award that people give out for this? My defender of the year, Nico Schlotterbeck, right there.
Nice.
So
I
gotta represent for my king. I don't know how he wasn't starting for Germany. What's another thing that you predict? I don't know. That's kind of like your basic like season awards right there. So I just gave you everything. Yusufa Moukoko over 1,000 minutes. I don't gamble, so I don't know like the over lines to give you, but I'm going over.
Love all that. Thank you. One of my breakout players is definitely going to be Rota as well. This isn't a youth player by any means, but I'm really excited and just praying that we get to see a good Niklas Süle. I mean, he looks like he's a lot more motivated this year. He doesn't have a Mats Hummels to compete against. I'm hoping this will be the year that he can really assert himself as a center back on this team, and just like the Bundesliga in general. I mean, he didn't really have a consistent role as that guy at Bayern, obviously, and he's clearly struggled here as well, but he's still got plenty of years left in him to really prove himself if he chooses to do so. So I'm hoping that will be this will be the year for him for that. I mentioned Rota already. I'd like to see Moukoko get really assert himself as well. And in terms of just in the table, I'm thinking we finish second. And I'm hoping to see a deep Pokal run. It's been a while since we've been really competing for that. I think that's a competition that we can absolutely compete for, and the actual silverware, and not just running deep. So I'm hoping we can get to a semi or even a final. In terms of the Champions League, I'm obviously going to see what the group looks like, but I'm not.
Final.
No groups. League format.
Oh,
also,
yeah,
I forgot signing of the season. I'm going Valdemar Anton. I'm playing it very soon. Actually, no. I'll go Jan Koto. We haven't even signed him yet. I just want the extra prediction credit for when it happens.
That was pretty much it for me. I'm overall just the more cohesiveness and just our style of play too. I'm looking to get back to watching and enjoying Dortmund football. And last season it felt more like a chore, and I got excited to go and kind of escape to watch my local club, St. Louis City, and then slowly somehow that transitioned into being depressing as well. So I'm hoping Dortmund can lift my spirits up again for this next season.
Carver, I think part of the chore is actually doing a podcast too, because we give ourselves this extra work.
The labor of love.
Yeah. Real quick predictions. I won't go too far, but I think I would be happy with third. I think even last year, like being short on players in different positions all across the field, like we still had the players to way better than we were. So hopefully we get these reinforcements coming in will only help. And I would be happy with third. I want to win the freaking Pokal. I just want to win something, and I think Pokal's it's right there. I want to see. I don't think breakout year, but I just want to see more of Duranville. Have been so down because he's just been injured the last 2 years.
Played 10 minutes this year.
Ugh,
10.
It's ridiculous, and everyone's hyping him up, and everyone got excited in that Mainz game, and I was excited too. But I'm like, you just have been injured the whole time, and you're been like
he was injured when he signed too.
Yeah.
To be that injured, that young, I'm just worried. So hopefully we actually see something from him this year. Very excited for JBG. I think this is his time again to just, he can probably, the question marks have always been around Mullen and Adeyemi, although I love both of them. People always question them, and this is like his chance to just prove it and like take one of their spots straight up if he wants it. Those are my quick predictions. I'd like to see Vechin too, Vachin, however you want to say it. I know we saw him in a very limited run, but I liked it, and I just like the idea of this young kid. I really got the romanticized feeling of Marco Royce passing the torch to him in that last game. So I was like, bring it on. I live for the romantics. So that's what I want.
I got a quick question for the three of you guys. I know I'm not hosting today, but who of the following players do you think has the most or actually can you give me a 1 through 3 rank? Who has the most minutes? Watson, Duranville, and Paris
for the senior team, obviously.
For the senior team.
I gotta say Duranville's gotta be number 3. Bruno's gotta be number 2, and Vachin's gotta be number 1.
That's my guess as well.
Eli, it's okay that you're not hosting but still doing that, because I had a much longer list of the young kids, and I was gonna do that rank through 1 through 10. But considering we just kind of we were going long,
I stole it. Here, you
perfect.
can you can give me the list, and I'll go because I can be quick.
All right, Duranville, Rota, Vechin, Koulibaly. Well, my list is dead. It's all dead.
Bruno. Rota 1, Koulibaly last. Duranville second. He's gonna get, I think, 500 minutes this year. I think he's kind of like gotten to the age where he's a little bit more physically mature. Give him 500 minutes. I don't know who you probably said Watson. He can go 3. Actually, no, he can go 2. I was trying to give Duranville not second to last over a guy who's not going to be at the club, but you couldn't get through your list, so I couldn't.
No, I think Vechin, Watson, whatever you want to say it, I think he's tops for me again because I'm sold on the romanticism of it. And Paris Brunner, I just think maybe if he kicks off with BVB 2, then yeah, he'll see the jump. But I'm just not quite sold yet. I know he's a good player. I'm not down him at all.
I think the thing with Paris Brunner is like it is always hard in your first senior campaign. Like we've seen some guys like Lamine Yamal, and you forget that that's the exception. I think like Paris Brunner, like 500 minutes, like max is kind of like my expectation at the very, very best. It's very rare you see a guy come in and instantly like be able to start games. So that's kind of like my line for him. Like give me 500 minutes, 2 goal contributions. I don't care if it's a deflection. Get it.
The only thing I was going to add into all that is that I do think that if we're talking about in terms of who of the youngsters for the new season is going to get the most time, I definitely think it's going to be Watson, just because I think he's just in a position of need, and I think that depth is going to be absolutely necessary and key for Dortmund. He showed in the last couple games of the season when he did play that, especially against the lower tier opposition, he's definitely going to be able to do a job. So I do think that we'll be seeing a lot more of him. And once again, we've already mentioned Şahin in general has more of a focus on youth, and he said in interviews, which is what's been going around, he wants to focus more on youth. So I think that coupled with kind of the need for midfield and kind of Watson's versatility, I really think that he's really going to get maybe not. I'm not going to say like I'm going to say a substantial amount of minutes. It's not going to be obviously starter minutes or anything like that, but it's definitely going to. We're going to see a lot more of him than some people might expect.
All right. Well, if you want to hear Eli host a podcast, yeah, Eli.
I
Brian,
think they already did.
You guys, yeah, plug Dortmund Dispatch, everything you guys do. Let them know.
Everywhere you listen to podcasts, it's Dortmund Dispatch. Fun trivia on YouTube. honestly, I think the first time we did trivia was with Jacob and Carver, and they kind of cooked some of our hosts. So we might have to invite them back on, see if any of our hosts can take some revenge. So we are on YouTube. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, I had those. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are everywhere, providing you with the best BVB content.
Whoa. Shots fired. Shit.
Alongside
Whoa.
BVB Pod. Alongside BVB Pod.
Those shots weren't warranted. I don't stand by them.
Alongside
content-
BVB Pod. See, I was just taking a breath. I talked for too long. I was trying to get alongside out, but he just cut me off.
Our content is good too, though. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
And the Instagram will definitely be a lot more poppin' once the season starts. Right now, it's in kind of a bit of a hibernation mode, but yeah, once season starts, we'll get more content out there on there too. So for our Insta heads, we'll have more on there too. So that's my wheelhouse.
It's the best content when we come together. So we appreciate you
This
guys.
is true. This is true. The collabs are the beautiful part of all this.
No, we appreciate you guys having you on. And I know Brian's been on so many times, so Eli, it's good finally getting you on because you've given us the courtesy of being on your show a couple times. We will be back next week. Dortmund Dispatch will be back with episodes soon too. So we'll talk to you guys later.